Reason 2, why the Grapes of Wrath is not a timeless classic economics. Now, whereas Malthus imagined that the population put pressure on the means of production, Marx believed the means of production put pressure on population. In other words, it's not the size of the population that is bearing down on the means of production and they don't suffice. It is that the economic system that is in place puts the pressure on the population. Karl Marx identified what he called the means of production. Anybody? The means of production? Nobody, right? Okay. And the relations of production, both of which amount to the notion of the mode of production. The means of production, the structure by which and through which things get made and economics circulates. The relations of production, the social relations that occur between people as a result of the flow of capital, as a result of the flow of money. For Marx, capital ideology mystifies the mode of production. For Marx, the route to equality is in demystifying the fate of surplus value. That's a simplification. Well, he said it himself, but let us just say that. Well, let us just say, in simple terms, where does all the money go? Once you know that, then you understand how the system works. This is Marx's theory. Mustafa's going to read you a passage. It's passage number 6. The Joad family have arrived in California off the strength of a flyer, an advertisement, which has encouraged them to cross the country and come to California because in California they can pick fruit and make more money than they've ever made before and be housed and looked after. So it says on the flyers, which have made their way all the way across the country. Come to California, there is work, there is wealth. They have arrived in California and they've met people, they've told people about the flyers, and this particular chap is cynical and explains to Tom Joad how the flyer system works.
Look, the young man said, suppose you got a job at work and there's just one fellow who wants the job. You gotta pay him when he asks. But suppose there's 100 men. He put down his tool, his eyes hardened, and his voice sharpened. Suppose there's 100 men who wants the job. Suppose the men got kids, and them kids is hungry. Suppose a lousy dame will buy a box of mush for them kids. Suppose a nickel will buy at least something for them kids. And you got 100 men. Just offer them a nickel. Why? They'll kill each other fighting for that nickel. Know what they was paying? Last job I had? 15 cents an hour. 10 hours for $1.50. And he can't stay on the place. Got to burn gasoline getting there. He was panting with anger, and his eyes blazed with hate. That's why them handbills was out. You can print a hell of a lot of handbills where you save paying 15 cents an hour for free work. Tom said, that's thinking.
Now, this type of exploitation, this type of devotion to profit at the expense of the individual results in a society that neglects or subtracts labor value towards maximizing surplus value. In other words, if it's cheaper not to pay people anything at all, then don't. Nora is now going to read you a passage which documents the degree to which the farmers in the Grapes of Wrath find that they cannot afford to, well...
The spring is beautiful in California, valleys in which the fruit blossoms are fragrant pink and white waters in the shallow sea. And all the time the fruit swells and the flowers break out in long clusters on the vines. And in the growing year the warmth grows and the leaves turn dark green. And first the cherries ripen, $1.50 a pound. Hell, we can't pick 'em for that. Black cherries and red cherries, full and sweet, and the birds eat half of each cherry, and the yellow jackets buzz into the holes the birds made. And on the ground the seeds drop and dry with black shreds hanging from them. The purple prunes soften and sweeten. My God, we can't pick them and dry and sell for them. We can't pay wages, no matter what wages. And the purple prunes carpet the ground. And first the skins wrinkle a little, and the swarms of flies come to feast, and the valley is filled with the odor of sweet decay. The meat turns dark, and the crops shrivel on the ground. Then the grapes. We can't make good wine. People can't buy good wine. Rip the grapes from the vines, good grapes, rotten grapes, wasp-stung grapes, press stems, press dirt and rot. And in the eyes of the hungry there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage.
There's the line, that's where the title of the book comes from. Now, here's an interesting one. So what you have here is an example of the degree to which the banks and the distributors have placed the squeeze on the farmers in relation to being able to pick the fruit. So the farmers feel that they can't afford to pick the fruit and the fruit rots. Now, before we start thinking this type of economic model is a thing of the past, I just direct you to the handout. This is dated, when was it? January. January of this year, actually, January the 13th. It's the International Herald Tribune, which I found on Jovita's desk that particular day. And the headline appears, you see it, after riots, an Italian town simmers. It's the Italian town of Calabria, where apparently, without reason, without proper explanation, lots of African migrant workers rioted. And the local townspeople responded, and there was a full-on riot in the town of Calabria. If you turn over the page, you can see that. You can tell I put this handout together in a rushed fashion. You'll have to forgive my, my scissorsmanship. This is the article, After Riots in Italian Town Simmers. There's the article there. And inside, I've got, if you turn it vertically, After Riots, Migrants Leave Home in Calabria. That's the article. The passage I'm most interested in is this one here. And I've taken it from the article. It's on the screen. Calabria, like other southern Italian regions rich in agriculture, has long benefited from hefty European Union agricultural subsidies. Some authorities have hypothesized that it may be more lucrative for some Calabrian landowners to let their harvest rot and collect the EU subsidies than to pay workers to pick them. 3 months ago. The idea being that the Italian farmers are on such big subsidies from the European Union that it is cheaper for them to let the produce rot than to pay the African migrant workers to pick it and box it. These would be African migrant workers who would be in Italy in the first place because they traveled looking for jobs and sustenance from a country that experiences a large degree of famine. The pressure of the means of production on population. George Bush requested and was granted $87 billion in 2005 alone from US Congress for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. $87 billion. That figure, according to the Red Cross, could eradicate malaria in 3 or more African nations and lay down an infrastructure for sustainable development in at least one of those nations. $87 billion. Reason number 3 why The Grapes of Wrath is not a timeless classic. The body. Why are there Africans in Calabria in the first place? In the words of Edward Said, we are here because you were there. In short, African labourers, Asian labourers, Southeast Asian labourers leave home seeking sustenance and shelter. Shelter from the storm. I'm echoing there the Benjamin's quote about the angel of history. And Bob Dylan. Here's an interesting story. People borrow a mortgage from a bank. If they default on their mortgage, they lose their house. Banks lend and invest money to increase profits. If banks can't balance their books, they get bailed out by the government. Observation. There is a hegemony in operation between financial remuneration and physical coercion. This hegemony is institutionalized and ultimately directed towards control of the body, which is what I'm interested in, the control of the body. The other is, like you say, that's opinion, substantiated with facts and figures. But it's the body that interests me now, because it's the body as it appears in Steinbeck that is radical. Michel Foucault has written in his famous book, Discipline and Punish, in our societies, the systems of punishment are to be situated in a certain political economy of the body. Even if they do not make use of violent or bloody punishment, even when they use lenient methods involving confinement or coercion, it is always the body that is at issue. The body and its forces, their utility and their docility, their distribution and their submission. Adam is going to read to you a passage now where Tom Joad, having recently been released from prison, is telling a friend about a person he knows who was in prison for life, and this person's position on their feeling, their thoughts of having spent their life in prison.
said, "There's a guy in McAllister, lifer. He studies all the time. He's secretary of the warden, writes the warden's letters and stuff like that. Well, he's one hell of a bright guy and reads law and all stuff like that. Well, I talked to him one time about her, 'cause he reads so much stuff, and he says it don't do no good to read books. Says he's read everything about prisons now, and in the old times, and he says she makes less sense to him now than she did before he starts reading. He says it's a thing that started way to hell and gone back, and nobody seems to be able to stop her, and nobody got sense enough to change her. He says, for God's sake, don't read about her, because she says, for one thing, you'll just get messed up worse, and for another, you won't have no respect for the guys that work the governments."
Thanks.